I've got to know where my help comes from. All my help comes from the Lord. All my help comes from God. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I've got some help, and I know where my help comes from. You've got to learn how to lean and depend on God. The strange paths of God will take us on some unfamiliar journeys, some places that we've not seen before. But we ought to be glad that we can get there. We ought to be glad that we can make it. Now look at your own journey. Look what the Lord has done for you. I'm so glad that when he came down to see about me, that if he had came to the church house, he may not have found me.
Come on.
But I'm so glad that on his way to the church house, that he stopped by some of them other houses. He stopped by the liquor house. He stopped by the crack house. He stopped by that other house. He stopped by and came to see about you and I. You ought to be glad about it, the path that you take. He knows all about your situation. Let me recall a few witnesses that can recount and tell us about how good God is when you're trying to get there, when you're trying to make it there, when you're trying to get to Jesus, but yet there's the press of the crowd. Come here. There's a woman with the issue of blood. Because of the press of the crowd, she could not get to Jesus. All of those who were around him were precluding her way. But the Bible tells us that when she looked up, she saw something protruding, sticking out of the crowd. It was the hem of his garment. Aren't you glad that when you can't get there, you can hold on to the hem of his garment? When you hold on to the hem of his garment, there's healing there. There's deliverance there. There's power there. After a while, and by, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I got one more witness. I'm almost out of time, but let me call my other witness. There was this man who was paralyzed. If you would open up to the gospel according to St. Luke, the 5th chapter, around the 18th verse, you would discover that there was a man who was paralyzed. They put him on a mat with a man on each corner. They carried the man to where Jesus was. But the Bible tells me that when they got there, they could not get in the front door because of all the people. But my Bible tells me that these fellas came up with a plan. They hoisted him up in the air, took the roof off and lowered him down in order to get to Jesus. I stopped by to tell you that if you can't get in the front door, sometimes you got to go to the back door. I'm so glad that after a while and by, if it had not been for some back doors in our lives, we couldn't have made it this far. If it had not been for some back door experiences, many of us couldn't have made it this far. But you ought to be glad. You ought to be glad that the God I serve, the God of the front door, is God of the back door. All I know is that he didn't bring me this far to leave me alone. I wish I had a witness. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? God's been good. He's been good. He's been good. I know he's been good. He's been good. Strange paths will lead you to Jesus. Strange paths will create healing in your body. Strange paths will create understanding in your heart. Strange paths will fix your marriage. Strange paths will bring your children home. Strange paths will heal your church. But I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I've got Jesus. I've got Jesus. And he's everything that I need. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? I've got Jesus. And I can get to him. I may not be able to get to him like you get to him. but I can get to him because I know who he is. And most important, he knows who I am. You might not know my name, but I'm so glad that he knows my name. I'm so glad that he reached way down and picked me up out of the muck and miry clay. Do I have a witness?
Yes, sir.
Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Has he ever healed your body?
Yes.
Has he ever done anything for you? Has he ever brought you out of bondage? Has he ever done anything for anybody? You ought to tell him thank you.
Yes.
Tell him thank you. Tell him thank you for what he's done for you. He'll make a way out of no way. So I want to say this in closing to President Obama. You got to learn how to hold on a little while longer. Health care may not come in the front door, but I'm so glad that God's got a back door. I'm so glad that God's got a window. I'm so glad that God's got a crack. I'm so glad that God has a way of fixing things. You got to hold on a little while longer. The strange paths of God, though it may not come the way we think it ought to come, God has a way of fixing it for you and I. It's all about knowing him for yourself that brings about the greatest change. Don't you be upset about the path that you find yourself on. But you've got to travel that path for yourself. I can't travel it for you. I got my own path. And it's not smooth either. But you pray for me and I'll pray for you. But you got to travel your own path. You got to go home and deal with them. You got to go to work and deal with them. I got to deal with them too. We're all on a path. But stay the course and know that you will get there. The path that you're on is the path that God put you on. And the Lord will bring you to a different path in life. But you have to travel the one that is before you. It's like this. Sometimes the grass looks green on the other side, doesn't it? And sometimes when you're sitting around the table, you may be on a special diet and somebody sitting with you is eating with you, may not be. And that food sure does look good. But you know you better eat what you're supposed to eat if you're going to stay here. The same thing holds true with God. You have to accept what the Lord has placed before you. Stop hoarding and wanting everything you see everybody else with. They're on that path for a reason. To whom much is given, much is required. So when you hating on me because of the path I'm on, you don't know what I went through to get on the path that I'm on. And I want to say this to you as we close out. Whatever your lot, ask the Lord to give you the strength to deal with it. Stay there and battle. And God will give you strength that you will persevere in the end. The most difficult thing to do is to battle in the face of adversity. When you're talking with someone and they don't show the love of God, it's easy to become discouraged. But you got to battle your way through that thing. Something about when you battle your way through it, that you come out the other end unscathed. Christians need to learn how to fight and battle. Sometimes we fight and battle for the wrong things. Over people and stuff. Even stuff that don't belong to us. But we need to battle for the things that are right and for the purpose that God has placed in our lives. The thing that you need to remember is the gift that God has given you. The devil wants to confuse you, criticize you, and keep you from exercising the gift that God has given you. That's the way the enemy works. Well, Reverend, I would do it, but I don't want folks looking at me. They're going to be looking at you anyway. You don't have to worry about them looking at you long, but some of them sitting out there looking at you may not be up there to look at you when you get up there. So you've got to do it anyway. It's all about